I can hear you. Thank you very much.
Oh, perfect. All right, I heard it. All right, we're going to call the July 10th meeting to order. It is 5 o'clock. Roll call. We have everyone present but Paul. John Marriott's joining us virtually from those in the room. So we will open this up for public comment. Just as a reminder, we've got quite a bit on the list here. Ben, I know you'll gather some that are online, but we'll start with the ones in the room. You've got 3 minutes, and I'll start the timer here. You'll hear it go off, but we want to make sure we fit everybody in. So our first one up for comment today is Oliver Pete.
Staying here.
Chair, hold up.
Good evening, Jefferson County Aircraft Advisory Board. My name is Oliver Pete. I live in Superior. I'm here today to present both a problem and a solution, which has been implemented in other airports in Colorado and in the United States. For many years, the airport and Superior have coexisted harmoniously. Since 1999, when my house was built, up until about 2018, the airport never really exceeded 175,000 operations annually, according to FAA statistics. However, since 2018, operations have rapidly increased and continue to increase with the introduction of several flight schools, and is projected this year to reach around 300,000, a significant increase. This surge has created a disturbance between Superior and Jefferson County, as you're well aware. Despite efforts by Superior and neighboring counties to collaborate with Jefferson County to find a solution, no resolution has currently been achieved. Instead, Jefferson County has continued to expand operations with the introduction of additional flight schools such as Independence Aviation and the construction of new infrastructure like Taxiway O, which is expected to increase operations by an estimated 12%. This lack of cooperation and unsuccessful attempts to work together harmoniously have compelled Superior and its residents to take drastic measures, including lawsuits. The ongoing actions on both sides have only widened the gap and increased frustrations. I'm concerned to think about what will happen in a year or two from now as frustrations continue to grow, as no resolution on the problem has been reached. Fortunately, I do come with you with a solution today that benefits both parties, and one I don't believe has been sufficiently discussed, and that is landing fees. Landing fees help both sides. It helps Jeffco. My modeling shows that Jeffco would receive $1.1 million a year in revenue, and this would offset the costs from the flight schools, which are currently 8% of revenue, according to Stephanie Corbo. Jeffco would look like the hero, tackling the solution head on, becoming a problem solver by adding these landing fees as well. And as a result of landing fees, nothing would be banned completely from the airport. Touch and goes would still be allowed. Superior benefits, as touch and goes are the most common noise problem, as shown by the monthly Hankering environmental reports. Landing fees are likely to reduce touch and goes. And with touch and goes reduced, the complaints and the various lawsuits would be satisfied, reducing costs, saving time, money, hassle, and bringing everyone closer together as two communities. So my request today is pretty simple. Implement weight-based landing fees without discrimination. Thank you.
All right, if I mess up on any names on the list, I apologize in advance. It looks like our next one is Carol Gossenheimer. Close enough?
Hi there, I'm here to talk about accountability. Our MMA has brought in multiple new pilot training schools in recent years, including Independence Aviation, as recently as last month. The result of this overabundance of training schools has been a huge increase in operations and pattern work over our communities. Pattern work is extremely loud, creates pollution in our communities, and occurs continuously all day long, up to 17 hours a day, and then into the nighttime as well. As you are well aware, noise pollution at these levels causes respiratory agitation, racing pulse, high blood pressure, headaches, strokes, colitis, heart attacks, sleep loss, psychological disorders, etc. In addition, lead is considered a neurotoxin for children and not safe at any level, causing permanent developmental issues, hearing loss, and more. and the inherent risk of approximately 300 operations per year in a densely populated metropolitan area creates an extremely high risk for crashes and resulting property damages and death. In essence, this airport, as it currently is operating, is destroying the health and well-being of our residents, including increased health care costs amounting to $735 million annually. Yet, only 1% of the population benefits from this airport. Our MMA has a responsibility towards the community in which it exists to mitigate the nuisance of noise pollution and danger to our community. You have brought in all these flight schools. Now it is time to act responsibly by implementing limitations on touch and go operations and other pattern work, impose curfews, and impose landing fees. Yes, this is legal. Part of the job description for the RMMA airport director included the following. The director must be actively engaged with surrounding communities, residents, and other stakeholders and aspire to be a good neighbor. And many of these, the key questions in Mr. Dahl's listening session focused on community engagement. In his Q&A during the listening session, Mr. Dahl committed towards activities that would engage the community. He stated the following, as so for me, public engagements start, on the sidewalk. He went on to say, I always like to be approachable. I like to have an attitude where I'm always listening to the things you say, and I'm actively engaging in that by understanding what your thoughts are, understanding, what the current situation is, or understanding what the noise is like at your location. He mentioned that one of his priorities will be being out there. I reached out to Mr. Dahl 24 days ago by email to initiate a meeting with concerned citizens and have not received a response. Another community member I know also reached out to him and also received no response. Mr. Dahl has been on payroll for almost a month. I have heard of zero community engagement since he started, and I'm not talking about engaging with tenants. Since community engagement is an extremely important element of this job, and righting many of the wrongs that have occurred over the past several years is critical, we expect Mr. Dahl to take accountability, prioritize, and begin engaging with the community and working towards immediate solutions, as he promised and is expected as part of the job. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, we've got Sue Hula.
I'm all set.
Okay. Jackie Sum.
My name is Jackie Soma. I've been a longtime resident of Arvada in Jefferson County. Yes, I was a resident before the airport was here. I'll hear that. We moved to Skystone a few years ago because one of my family members had some medical problems, so we needed to move to Skystone. I was familiar with the airport. I'm familiar with the noise. There wasn't very much noise when we moved into Skystone. It was minimal. That's not the case anymore. So I set to figure out why. I'm an engineer by background. I apologize. I do research, it drives my family crazy. So I did research as to what is going on with the noise and what is happening here at the airport. I'm finding that the airport traffic now exceeds 2030 expectations. The growth has been super strong since the pandemic. Why has this been occurring? The new airport management was encouraging growth and he was doing his job very well. There are now at least 4 to 6 pilot schools, I can't keep up, who are offering promises to the hopeful young pilots that will train you on how to become a pilot. These promising pilot educations aren't coming cheap to these bright-eyed young students. The typical fees are $100,000 for programs. They're urged to sign up for high-interest loans. It reminds me of those scandalous days of Westwood College. Anybody remember that Westwood College program? They promised easy diplomas and they charged a lot. The college eventually closed under disgrace, leaving kids without diplomas, saddled with a lot of debt. In fact, the president of one of the pilot schools here used to work at Westwood College. Go figure. Okay, so I'm trying to, I've also looked on various blog sites to see what the student pilots are thinking about the programs. And I'm finding they're very frustrated. Their drop rates are about 80%, and they're still saddled with these really high loans. They're not finding the jobs that were promised. And yet we keep on saying, we need the pilot schools. Do we really need the pilot schools? And do they need to be here at our MMA? I'm not sure. I also found that the pilot schools represent only a small portion of the income for the airport, about 8%. But they're accounting for about 90% of the flight traffic going over my neighborhood in Skystone. About 90% of the noise complaints that we're getting. So you're taking income of about 8% and you're getting 90% of the complaints from this little tiny bit of income. And I'm not talking about one student doing a flight, maybe 10 to 30 patterns over the neighborhood. We're having one student doing 10 to 30 patterns, and then we're having 4 to 6 planes doing that at the same time. Picture that in your head. One person circling around 10 to 30 times, add that in with 4 to 6 planes. Now take a picture of that in your mind of what's happening. That's every 1 to 2 hours. Now that's happening 14 hours a day. Give a mental picture of that. So on pleasant summer days, it's even worse. I can't even have friends over into my backyard. Construction crews are required to keep their hours between 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The airport doesn't have to obey that, and they're not. We had pilots flying over last night at 12:30 at night. We had pilots flying this morning at 5:30 in the morning. These aren't just the pilots coming in and out. These are from the pilot schools. So I need you to consider, is it worth the headache of the 8% of the flight schools that you have for the 90% of noise complaints, the lawsuits that are happening, the angry people that are here at the meeting? Is it worth it that you're seeing that this, and I also feel sorry for these students that are signing up for these programs at $100,000. That it means having with huge loans, with huge promises of jobs. It's not happening.
Thank you.
Is it really worth it? Thanks.
All right, next up, we got Jason Serbu.
Evening. My name is Jason Serbu. I think some of you may know me. I'm the trustee for the town superior, and I was the liaison to the community noise roundtable until that was suspended a couple months ago. Every meeting we have, I do a board report and I give the updates on the nighttime flight patterns that we're using. And I'm not certain if the aviation community is hearing this, so I just want to give a brief update of where we are right now and where we can continue in the future. But we started this pattern for nighttime flights to bring the pilots doing nighttime work off the town of Superior onto the 36 corridor. We started this on September 19th of last year. And when we began at the airports, idea was we were probably going to hit 50% within 12 months. We hit 50% in April. So we're ahead of schedule by 5 months. And as of last Monday morning, we are at 69% compliance, and that's voluntary. So I definitely want to thank the aviation community for adhering to the voluntary noise abatement program as much as possible. And I would just like to impress upon the board continuing to do that. So whenever possible, between the hours of 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which is 0400 to 1200 UTC, please utilize 30 right and 2 left as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is Lucy Smith.
Hi, I'm gonna talk loud enough so everybody here. I'm just winging it. I'm from the Green Knolls neighborhood. And I've only been, when there used to be the round table, I came like 3 times. Could tell right away it was a waste of time for the people that have been here 4 years. I live in Green Knolls, so I'm right across the highway and for Wadsworth, and the noise is unbearable. On Sunday alone, 7 hours straight, 4 training planes. You could, the minute one went over our backyard, you could hear the next one coming the minute it left. 7 hours straight, not 1 second where it was quiet, not one. That is ridiculous. And out of these training planes, how many are really trained to be pilots? From what I'm hearing, a lot of it's joyriding. You know, they're just having fun. And the noise, as you can tell, I get so frustrated. I'm snapping at people. I can no longer play any games with my grandchildren in the backyard. It is so noisy. We cannot have people in our backyard. It was so bad even last fall that I'm writing to the FAA and I say, all these planes are going over our house. And they wrote me back and they said only 1 did. You're going to be kidding me. I'm looking up in the sky and I could see 5 in that. And they said, well, and I said, well, it's a new flight pattern. And they said, no, this isn't a new flight pattern. And I kept bugging them. It is a new flight pattern over our house. And they said, well, it is a new circling route that they do. Oh, well, that's the same thing as a flight pattern. But no, they said it's not. And so I'm just saying, it's these planes, like, I agree with Carol, all the people before me, 100% of what they're saying. If I could just say ditto, 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 all the way down. It's more the training planes than anything else. And it's just not right that we have to put up with this noise. And we have a plane, we hear every morning at 5:30. I sleep with 2 sound machines and a fan every freaking night. And that because you do hear planes at night, 11:30, 12:30, and they're not all night long. They'll still wake you up if you don't have all the fans and the sound machines, and that has helped. But I'm still ready to move. My husband wants to stay. We'll wear earring plugs. So he's got plugs for me. He's got all this stuff. I go, this is ridiculous to be doing this. And even last fall during a Bronco game, we had to hit the replay. I could not hear what they were saying, and our windows were closed because of planes going by. And it's just getting to be too much. Thank you.
Next up, Gene Smith.
I'm just gonna add a little bit, that's my wife speaking, but, I'm also from Green Knolls. Our biggest complaint is the training planes, by far. If it wasn't for the training planes, we probably wouldn't even be here. I think a lot of people wouldn't be here. Because we all live with the landing planes, we know that's there, and we know that that's a requirement of your airport. But the training planes are ridiculous. You are not taking into account the neighborhood surrounding the area. And I think that there are restrictions that you could impose on these training schools as to how loud their planes are or what hours they go. These planes, we've been in our house for 34 years, and it is ridiculous. And the planes that are, the training planes are the loudest planes by far of any planes that go around. I think they're older planes. I think they don't have to meet the same sound decibels meetings, but I'll tell you, there are some very quiet planes that are the same size as the training planes that come through, and we barely hear them. They're almost silent. If all the training planes had to meet a sound requirement and they were quiet, we wouldn't even look up. But because they're so loud that we can't even speak to each other when we're 5 feet from each other, it's crazy. So I think limited hours on training planes and quieter training planes. I mean, this is like the least possible thing you can do, and it would help a lot of people to be happy about what's going on, and you could still continue to have the flight schools that you have. They've been there for 34 years, and as my wife mentioned, we're thinking we're gonna have to move because we can't use our house, we can't use our yard, and the people that are gaining from these are the airport. We're the ones that are being hurt. Property values, our livelihood, our living, how we live on day to day. It is just not right. So, thank you.
Kay Almond.
Hi, I'm Kay Allman. This is the first time I've ever come to a forum like this. Really didn't know what to expect. I live in Green Knolls as well. I've lived there for 33 years. Never had an issue with the airport until like the last 5 years. And I agree with Jean and Lucy. We can't sit in our backyard. We had friends over on Monday afternoon. Literally, they were like, what? What? That's how loud it was. And they were flying right over our house. Also, my husband and I are early risers, and we also go to bed early. 5 o'clock in the morning, planes are starting to go over. I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. Thank God I'm retired. I don't have to get up and go to a job. And of course, at night, I agree also, midnight. It's really ridiculous. There ought to be some limitations that could be put on these, if nothing more than a time schedule, no earlier than, no later than. And it is the training planes, because that is the ones that make more noise than the JSX flights that come over, excuse me. So, thank you.
All right, I'm struggling to see this one. It looks like John Zrimick.
You said it perfect, but I had no comment.
Okay. Carolyn Fardman.
Hi, Mr. Dahl.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. My name is Carolyn. I'm a resident of Jefferson County in Westminster. I live in Westbrook. Westbrook is situated outside of the 2011 master plan's influence area, but we are now very much influenced, and that's because of the flight schools. And the flight schools are up in the pattern around the airport, and because it's very congested and there's a high number of those aircraft doing their touch and goes, that pattern expands and widens. And that's why we're being affected. We are now under the pattern of the airport. We were not before when we moved here in 2017. To build trust with the surrounding community, I believe transparency and honesty are crucial. Jefferson County and the previous airport director have not been clear about the local control of the airport and what they hold over noise, light, and safety. And this lack of clarity has been really frustrating for all of us. There are two measures that I believe you guys can implement immediately. One of them was already mentioned, and that's landing fees. As Oliver said, that's the flight schools are only contributing 8% or $600,000 in revenue. That was in 2023 to this airport for the operations and maintenance. And I'm just kind of, that number, it's just like we're being sacrificed for that. And all while our taxpayer funded grants that help maintain and operate this airport are being used. I really think it's time for them to pay their fair share. Also, they account for over 50%, probably more, of operations at this airport. I'd really request you guys adhere to Grant Assurance 24 on this, which mandates that the airport must establish a fee and rental structure that ensures the airport is as self-sustaining as possible, promoting financial responsibility and reducing excessive reliance on federal funds. I also just ask you guys to think about what the benefit is of these flight schools and how that outweighs our health, our well-being, our quality of life. I would love to achieve some balance that we had back in 2017 when I moved here. Also, we really need to implement restrictions on touch and go operations to ensure the safety of pilots and residents. The high concentration of flight schools has led to significant congestion, as I said before, with piston engine aircraft frequently flying at low altitudes. And many of these aircraft struggle to even get to that 1,000-foot recommendation. And that just makes me feel unsafe. How are they going to land safely if something happens to their aircraft? Where are they going to land? The airport's surrounded by congested areas. Restricting touch and go operations can help alleviate this congestion and enhance our safety. I request that RMMA adhere to Grant Assurance 22I that states an airport sponsor may limit any given type, kind, or class of aeronautical use of the airport if such action is necessary for the safe operation of the airport or to serve the civil aviation needs of the public. Thank you for having me.
All right, next up, Bill Barada. I got that last name wrong, but
It's Bill Mariah. And I live in Green Knolls. And I've been following this airport now for 6 years, maybe 7. I've gone to commissioners' meetings down in Arvada. I've gone to the Westminster City Council meetings. I've gone to the Broomfield City Council meetings. I've gone to the CNRs repeatedly over the years. Now, this airport is based on figures and comments made by staff, the CNR, and the previous director, that 85% of the operations out here are general aviation and flight schools. If you can refute that, I would like to hear that. We're not, as a community, we're not really concerned with the general aviation, but we are concerned about flight schools. I've asked repeatedly for figures on this to find out if this is actually the figure that we're looking for. I've either got no response, or it cannot provide the data, or we don't know how to get it. This is ridiculous. You've got a big airport out here. You need to have the airport provide the figures. Now, leading to my second comment here, you're having a new taxiway out here. You said the new taxiway can accommodate 35,000 more operations. If 90% of your business is flight schools, how are you going to get 35,000 more operations? You can't. You can't without adding more flight schools. And just as you heard from some other people, you just added one. I went to the last CNR meeting, or the second to the last CNR meeting before they disbanded that. And Stephanie Corbel stated right to my face, we're not gonna add any more flight schools. And now you just added. The airport has basically turned the whole community against this airport. In regards to the community, noise levels are upwards to 90 decibels when the flight schools go over. And when you measure decibels on your previous ones, you monitored right over the airport. You didn't send people out to monitor over Green Knolls or over other areas of Westminster, or over countryside. You need to understand that the FAA put out this memo, and maybe some of you have seen it. So how does the FAA define significant noise? Anything over 65 decibels is considered not compatible with residential. How can we be out there at 90 decibels over my house, other people's houses? It's not right. Now, a lot of people have mentioned we need to have landing fees, which we should have landing fees out here. You know, you go to the park, you pay a fee to go to the park, to park your car. What about having curfews? 4 o'clock in the morning, planes should be landing. And one other thing, let me just finish. At 10 o'clock at night, when the planes are landing on the south runway, when it switches over, when the tower's not operating, all of a sudden, they're on the north runway and they're flying right over Green Knolls. That's not right either. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we got Charlene Wiley.
Thank you for allowing me to comment tonight. I'll keep my remarks brief. I've been in front of you many, many times before. I am a literally, figuratively case study in what happens to people who live near airports where we're abused, as you've heard described tonight. My health has taken a dramatic decrease, a remarkable decrease since 2018, when this onslaught began. Instead of going into that, I'll refer back to my master's degree and 40 years of professional experience as a business analyst. That is the business of this body. And I ask you to look at this from a business perspective. How do you allow this minimum contribution to the bottom line from flight schools turn into the plague that it is financially and to this airport in terms of how much it consumes versus how much it provides, the harm that it's doing to this community, the $735 million annual cost just in additional medical expenses, plus the loss of property value, to say nothing of the harm that it does to children who are subjected to this, who have learning problems, where we've had testament to that as well. This is a business body. It's not very difficult to figure out your bottom line. And I ask that you do that. Also, review carefully how this airport is operating and who's doing it. We found in a very recent Cora request, evidence of falsehoods put on a KTEX requirement. That's unbelievable. Who is running this show? You're a business body. I ask that you do your job, do your business oversight, and make rational decisions. Thank you.
All right, Roxy Jewell.
Mine's a little different. So I'm going to make a comment about your minutes. They're not proper minutes. So they're short, and we had all kinds of slides and stuff with that the last meeting, and those should be part of your minutes. Whether you have a bullet that a person can click on to go to the computer to look at those slides or whatever it takes, your minutes are incomplete. So I'm just saying that for a legal idea, for your residents, for taxpayers, that your minutes are incomplete, and I'd like for it to be fixed. Thank you.
All right, we've got still just one online comment.
Yep.
All right, Randy Johnson, where you're being unmuted now. Yeah, we're already past time on it. So.
Hello? Hello? Okay, good. Yeah, it's hard to figure out on the machine. Hi, I'm Randy Johnson. Sorry, I forgot to put down there from Laverre, South Santa Fe. I normally go to Centennial Airport and also the Rocky Mountain. Centennial doesn't have meetings this month. I write down planes that are noticeable. Haven't written down all planes as many as I used to, but I wrote down 571 in June. Had 11 complaints from Centennial and 2 from Rocky Mountain. So that number went down. I do want to thank the pilots that are not flying directly over. I see that the planes are spreading out, so they're not just, going down one lane. So I do have quiet time. And I do also see that many of the planes are avoiding flying directly over and flying over the upper space. So basically, that's it. My comment. I am seeing, some planes late at night, but they are, like I said, trying to spread out. So I do want to thank that. I believe, at least down in my area, they're trying to be good pilots. I'll say that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Randy.
Yep. You're welcome.
Normally we do allow, because I know I had a couple that wanted to, we're past the 30 minutes, but I wanted to make sure that everyone that had signed up had time. So I apologize if we can't add any more, but we have exceeded the limit on public comment. So we're going to move on to our next item of the agenda, which is the minutes. And I will comment on that. I do believe though the agendas with those documents are there to support the minutes. Are the agendas not posted, Ben, with the presentations?
Sometimes there are some, it depends how.
We'll make sure we do that, because normally minutes, well, I'm not a big fan of detailed minutes, but it should be accompanied by the agenda so that you can reference back to the two. So let us look at that. But we do have the minutes coming up for approval. Hopefully everyone saw that in your packet. Were there any changes to those minutes?
I think the comment was also to add PowerPoint presentations, so.
It should be on the agenda. That's what I was thinking. I think if it's in the accompanying agenda with the PowerPoints, you're able to use those as a reference back, but we'll make sure we talk about that. Were there any changes or comments to the minutes as presented? Do we have a motion to accept? Motion to accept. Do I have a second?
Yes.
We have a second. All right. Any conversation, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, first item on the business list, airport orientation. We've got 2 primary guiding documents that we're going to work through. And Eric or Ben, which one of you 2 is doing that? Perfect. I'll turn it over to you, Eric.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming out today. We'll try to go through airport orientation and continue airport orientation 101, and we're going to go through airport rules and regulations and minimum standards. Yeah, maybe. Do I just hit the mouse here? Sure. So on the airport website, in the Jefferson County website, Jefferson County, you're going to find a number of different documents for the airport. There's going to be rules and regulations, minimum standards, leasing standards. I think we're doing leasing standards maybe next time, but today I'm going to do minimum standards and rules and regs. What I tried to show is the relationship between the rules and regulations to the minimum standards. You have the airport users, airport administration, the sponsor, in this case, which is Jefferson County, and the FAA. In the FAA and admin corner, I have the different regulations that govern the relationship between airport administration and the FAA. And then the rules and regulations, minimum standards, and leasing standards that guide the relationship between airport administration and airport users. Perhaps in the future, we can kind of talk about some of the other relationships that exist and how those regulations affect everything. But today, we're going to focus on just that center column, airport users and airport administration. So Airport 101, rules and regs. So the purpose of rules and regs is really just to establish the policies that govern the airport. How does the airport operate? How do we interact with our tenants? How do we ensure that we have protect public health, safety, interest, the general welfare on the airport, and to restrict to prevent any activity which could cause or interfere with the safe, orderly conduct of the airport. I guess in that role, I do have some authority in the sense that I do develop airport rules and regulations. I work with the Airport Advisory Board to make sure that rules and regulations that we have on the airport are fair and just and equitable for all airport users. So there are a number of different sections within the airport rules and regulations that you'll find on the airport's website or portion of the Jefferson County website. There's the general rules and regulations that include provisions that affect all of our users at the airport, such as access control, what to do in the case of an accident or an incident, the general conduct that we'd expect on the airport, weapons, explosives, or other restricted activities that could happen on the airport. These rules are generally applicable to the airport director. I have some authority to change those, to modify and update as the situation affects us. Then there, inside the airport rules and regulations will be the aircraft rules and regulations that can guide things like the hours of operation, airworthiness, what to do in an accident or an incident, landing fees, takeoff, operations, flight instruction, noise abatement, and traffic patterns. There really is not a lot the airport can do, and I know there's frustration on that. I can hear it all the time. I do appreciate the comments that you guys express to us. But the customer that we want to talk to as a body is the FAA and what to do with those things. So the airport director has some limited authority in this area. Ultimately, the guiding force is the FAA rules and regulations themselves. For vehicle rules and regulations, it talks about vehicle permits, like how to get onto the airport, who's authorized to drive on the airport, where the AOA is, the kind of condition that we would expect your vehicle to be in, and where you can park. And those, once again, are rules that generally the airport director has authority to change and update and modify as needed. And then we kind of get into the kind of the nuts and bolts of rules and regs for what are the operator leasing rules and regulations. And you'll find these in two different spots. The airport rules and regulations will talk about leasing standards, but a lot of the guts of leasing standards are in the leasing policies and the leases that you'll find on the airport. And then there is the refueling, defueling, and fuel storage on the airport and what is required of an airport to sell fuel. What kind of fuels you have to have, where can it be stored, what kind of equipment can you use, things like that. Depending on the area that we're talking about, the airport director has some authority to change those things. Some I don't. So when we're talking about eliminating leaded fuel, the airport is guided by the FAA in that case, where we have till 2030 as a body to figure out how to resolve the leaded fuel. I know Ben is going to give an update later on our process to selling unleaded fuel at the airport. But in that case, the airport director is a little limited on what we can and cannot do. So I want to kind of give an example about rules and regs on the airport, something the airport's experienced in the past, and we kind of would like to get away from as it does create fraud. So off-premise trash is always one of the big concerns an airport has, where a tenant will bring construction debris from their project off airport, and they bring it on airport to dispose of, and utilizing the airport dumpsters to do that. If it's overflowing, then we kind of can create a fraud issue. So we always want to make sure that we don't bring off-premise garbage on the airfield and that we're disposing of garbage correctly. And there's just a picture on the airfield of someone's overflowed dumpster. And the operations department does go around and they look and make sure that everybody's trying to follow the rules on the airport. Another one to talk about is just security on the airfield and something called piggybacking. Piggybacking would be the case where a vehicle has access onto the airfield, and rather than stopping and letting the gate close behind them, they let another customer or tenant drive onto the airport behind them. That person behind them is the piggyback, and that does violate the airport security plan, and it does allow potentially an unauthorized person on the airfield. So we want to make sure that we're always being cautious and concerned about safety and security on the airport. That's kind of a quick primer on airport rules and regulations. You want to do questions and answers? Anybody have? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, so my question is, first of all, you had one of the four entities as the airport users. What feedback mechanism is there to review the rules and regulations? And also, all right, there's a perfect slide. Oh, go back.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so furniture and appliances
Uh-huh.
in the trash.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't want me bringing my sofa and throwing away in the airport trash. I get it. But
No.
what if, I don't know, I had an old desk I've had in the hangar for 15 years and then decided to throw that piece of junk away, threw it in the dumpster. Is there a means where you can say, hey, don't do that, and I can correct my behavior rather than, I mean, as I understand it, the way the rules and regulations are now, you can kick me off the airport. Where I don't have some, you know, I realize you're not, the odds of that happening are minuscule, but is there some method that we can correct that airport users have maybe a one strike kind of grace period kind of thing where you can fix the problem
I'd say-
before?
I'd say it's more of a encouragement penalty than anything else.
Yeah.
The goal is to teach you how properly to use the garbage, not to penalize you for
Okay,
using the
good. Yeah, I
garbage.
just want to make sure, I didn't hear that, and I just wanted to make sure it wasn't just, hey, you can't do this and you can't do that, and if you mess it up, you're gone.
No, I mean, one of the tricky, and you do bring up a good point, is one of the issues with having a multi-purpose type hangar, where like you have your airplane, you have a desk, you have tools and things, a chair. That is on airport premise garbage, technically, right? That would be something that would be probably not something we'd come after you for and say, hey, why are you doing that? In this case, the airport, it has cameras. We have a pretty good idea of what is happening for that trash.
I just want to make sure that's written in there somewhere. And that maybe the airport users get an opportunity to review whenever there's changes or whatever. I think that's fair, right?
We'll get to that
Okay, cool.
in a couple seconds. So, yeah, go ahead.
So I get that there's, you know, the FAA is kind of God when it comes to rules and regulations and procedures for operations and patterns and things like that. But let me ask you, to kind of get to the heart of what a lot of these folks are asking about. What is I assume that the airport has some authority over the terms of tenancy. The tenants, particularly flight schools, are signing when they become a tenant here. And no, we can't usurp what the FAA says somebody can and can't do. But in terms of hours, number of operations, or things like that, I've got to assume that as a part of tenancy, there must be some authority that the airport has.
Certainly. So rules and regulations deal with kind of your everyday activity, your behavior on the airfield. We're going to go into minimum standards, and then that will address one of your questions about flight training or leases in general, is like, what are the requirements that a business is actually on the airport? And if it's okay, if I go through minimum standards, and if you still have that question, we'll circle back. And I saw that question in the audience. I'm not too sure what protocol on that is.
With the board right now.
Okay. Catch me later. Okay, so minimum standards are about setting the absolute minimum bit that a business has to have while on the airport. So think of it as trying to prevent a situation where you have businesses that are competing tooth and nail to fight over pennies on the dollar, and they're sacrificing service levels to do it. The minimum standards are about elevating the minimum standard on all business at the airport, so everybody's competing on like an equal footing. One of the tricks on minimum standards, and this came up during the community session, during the interviews too, was, you know, can we give suggestions or can we propose changes to minimum standards? How does that mechanism look? How can we do that? And hopefully I have some news for that later at the end of this presentation. But the trick on minimum standards is, it is kind of where the sausage gets made on airport rules and regs and how businesses operate at the airport. So it is very tricky to change them without impacting unforeseen parts of the airport's operation. So I just want to, as we go through minimum standards, it's strongly advised we use caution on how we approach changes to the minimum standards. And the minimum standards deal with general requirements, like, you know, what is your level of experience as a business? Are you even experienced to do the kind of level of service that you're trying to offer? You know, what kind of lease do you want? You can't have non-discrimination, or you must have no discrimination. What kind of personnel will you have? What your security look like? Do you meet insurance requirements? And are you going to be responsible for tax? The fixed base operator is how do we control or set regulations related to people who run the gas station at an airport, for the lack of a better word? What is the scope of that operation? What is the activity? What kind of fuel are they going to sell? Personnel, training, hours, and aircraft. A lot of these will be kind of the same, but they're different levels of minimums for each type of business. We deal with non-commercial hangar developers, and what does that look like? These are people who will have building a hangar at the airport for profit. So they want to rent space in the hangar, have a plane come in, and generate profit for themselves. What are the rules? What are the standards that we expect of that person to operate that business? And the list goes on. So what do we expect from scheduled air carrier operators? What would we expect from non-commercial service, self-service fuel permits, commercial activity permits? And how do we expect, or what are the insurance requirements for these kind of businesses that operate at the airport? And then we get into beyond the general type of businesses that operate at the airport. We have specialized aviation service operators. So this includes like aircraft maintenance operators, avionics, instrument maintenance, aircraft rental, flying clubs, flight training, aircraft charters, management, fractional ownerships, and the list goes on. It's just the different types of sub businesses that you might find at like a fixed base operator. And so here's like an example of minimum standards and how it kind of applies to everyday business at an airport. The airport has minimum standards for maintenance operations at the airport. So like if you were operating a business and your service that you're selling at the airport is aircraft maintenance, and you allow a third party onto the airfield to do your aircraft maintenance, technically that's off-premise maintenance. And it's what it says. Any maintenance is any person who allows another individual onto the airport to do their aircraft maintenance for hire is in violation of off-premise maintenance. And so it just goes down to what that is. Essentially, like I said, allowing a third party onto the airport to do your aircraft maintenance is a violation of the minimum standard. And to kind of give a guide of where minimum standards come from, I'm going to circle back and talk about that first slide that we talked about, the aircraft FAA regulations, and particularly this one, FAA Order 5190.6B, which is the Airport Compliance Manual. It's long, it's 450 pages, and it sets out general guidance for an airport of how we meet both the minimum standards, grant assurances. Almost every part of an airport's operation is within that document. So it is important. It is a nesting doll of regulations. So like you will read what it says, and then you have to reference another section and then another section. And sometimes you get caught in a circular logic puzzle, but that is where generally the minimum standards come from. So
Just going back to that.
go ahead.
It's set by the FAA. What's your influence on changing any of those minimum standards as an airport?
So the minimum standards as an airport, we can adjust them to our limits with the FAA. So as long as we're in compliance with that order, we can make modifications to the minimum standards as long as it makes business sense. You know, we heard earlier about how important it is for the airport to be profitable, how important it is to be business successful. So the minimum standards are about how do we keep the shopping mall that's the airport in business while we feed all the stores inside the shopping mall. So we can make changes, and we'll talk about how that might work. But in this case, that order is what controls those minimum standards. So there was a question during the review about, is it available? Can we change minimum standards? Can we change rules and regs? What is the policy to do that? Well, there never really was one, as far as I could tell. Every year or so, I think Paul would say, yep, we'll invite inputs or whatever. I don't know if that's necessarily beneficial, but what I want to do is be a little bit more open and honest and transparent about how the airport makes our rules and regulations. And not allow, but listen to the community, listen to the airport users about how the airport can make those rules and regulations changes. So I want to listen, I want input, I want to understand from airport users what are rules and regulations that we could change, what are minimum standards that could be changed, and establish a path for you to do that. So we'll have an online tool, sort of like the noise event and concern portal where they would file noise complaints. The portal is, submit your proposals for airport rules and regulation changes, and I'll process those as I get them. So rather than 12 months or some unknown term, I'll go through them as I get them. And as a staff, we'll figure out the best way to either implement that plan or why it is we can't do it. And if we can't do it, to be honest about why it is we can't do it, and I will write the justification as to why it can't be done. So when you propose a rule and regulation change or a minimum standards change to an airport user, depending on how many we got and how fast they come in, we may be able to enact those rules and regulation changes as one thing, or we may have to take a bunch of them and combine them together into one rules and regulation change. But the goal is really to be as open and honest and transparent about the airport rules and regs as we possibly can, to allow and listen to what our airport users are talking about and to try to make the airport a better place for everybody. And I guess that sums up my rules and regulations and minimum standards education.
You go back one more.
Yeah.
I didn't finish reading that last item down there.
Yeah, sure. Basically, it just says that, rather than slowing the process down and doing one rule change at a time, if I have a number of them that it's easier to enact as one policy change, I'll just do them all as one edit rather than lots of different sub-edits.
Do we have a lot of requests in front of us right now for changes?
I could say there has not been a policy to do it, so I could not tell you what the queue out there looks like.
When do you expect the portal to be up and running, or is it the online portal for?
It's actually there now. So if
Oh,
you
okay.
go to the airport website and go to I want to, there's a section for rules and regulations and minimum standards changes.
Okay.
It does require you to log into Civic Plus to do that. And we'll ask for verification on your user, your lease number and your address to verify you're an airport user. But that would give you the opportunity to go in and propose rules and regulation changes.
Great.
So I don't know, any questions?
Questions from the board? All right, hearing none, we'll move into airport updates. We've got 4 updates coming. Are these coming from you, Ben?
I think the first one is Eric, actually, Otis and Delta.
I've been talking for a long time now.
I tried to give you a break. I tried to hand it off to Ben.
It's fine. Let me load up my notes.
Can I ask a question, Ben, while he's loading the notes? Maybe the stupidest question of the evening. Why do we call it Otis instead of Oscar, which is the FAA languaging? Just a stupid question.
I had to ask that one.
Nah.
I don't know how it came about when the project first came up. It was just started to be used as that term and it stuck for a while. My understanding is when it's actually built, it'll take the correct letter and order in terms of the parallel taxi lanes and it won't even be an O, won't even be an Oscar.
Okay.
So we're kind of waiting for that to just change it.
I promised it was the most inconsequential question of the evening, but I was just curious.
And what is the D?
Delta, taxiway Delta.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll go in. I kind of tried to do a summary since this is my first time talking about this project. I kind of built a summary into my notes just to kind of walk through. I know everybody here would probably be familiar with it, but for me, it's good to walk through kind of the process of the project. So taxiway Otis Delta or Oscar Delta or OD or ENEP, whatever it will actually end up being. Taxiways are really just the way for aircraft to get from their hangar to the runway superstructure. In this case, taxiway OD partially replaces some of the structure of taxiway Delta and then builds a new taxiway to the southwest area of the airport. So to kind of summarize kind of where we've been, we went to pre-bid meetings in June 2nd, 2024. Bid packages were due July 10th, 2024. So that was today. Bid opening was at 2:00 this afternoon and bid tabulations haven't been completed. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what it costs at the moment. But I'm sure Ben will have an update on that next time. It won't be me. However, it was mentioned briefly in the community section today, and I think it's important we talk about it as a body today about taxiway OD and an issue that but that was brought to our attention by an open records request in the community. So we did have an open records request for part of the category exclusion for taxiway OD. And I want to give a little back history on category exclusions, what they are, why we would do them, why the FAA does them, and whatnot. So when an airport does a development project, any development project, really, an environmental study is required. That the level of that environmental study depends on the impact of that project. But regardless of the project, an environmental study is required. When a project is limited in scope, like taxiway Otis or Delta is, the FAA uses a screening process to determine whether or not a full environmental impact study is required. In this case, the FAA came back that taxiway OD did not have a significant impact on the airport's operation or on the airport as a whole. So the FAA used the category exclusion method, which is like a checklist of us to go through and look at air quality, water quality, noise impacts, operational impacts, the things that you would think and you've heard about that are important to the community and to the airport. Airport hired Wolpert to do that study, to do that category exclusion for taxiway OD. When Wolpert did it, unfortunately, they had an inadvertent oversight in the CADEX, which unfortunately is an important oversight in an area that is important. So they did an oversight of the water resource report. And what they said when they were doing the project was that a water resource report was conducted. When the open records request came through and we looked for a copy of that report, we could not find it. We asked Wolpert where it was, and Wolpert could not provide it either. After doing an investigation into that process, Wolpert determined that there was an error on their part. And that at that point forward, Wolpert notified the FAA to tell them there was an issue with the category exclusion. We don't necessarily believe there's any environmental risk coming from the airport for this project, but it is important that a category exclusion is done correctly, that we address all issues of the CADEX correctly, and in the interest of being transparent and honest, it is important for me to come to you and tell you that there was an issue with the CADEX for taxiway OD. I'm not trying to hide it, I'm not trying to impact anything, just to say we have an issue. Wolpert talked to the FAA about the issue. FAA is aware of the issue. And the FAA is working with Wolpert and the airport to make sure we address the concerns that not only the open records request has, but that we have at the airport about what is the best practice or what is the impact on that taxiway. It is important to mention too, that the southwest area of the airport, when it drains into a construction pond, and then from there it goes to Basin 160, which is the main, or one of the airport's stormwater discharge lines. From there, it gets filtered through sediment and goes through the North Fork of Walnut Creek. And because of terrain flow at the airport, it doesn't flow into a reservoir, but it flows south and then north through South Platte River. But it does not impact the reservoir. We expect the updated CADEX, the water report, to be done in about 2 weeks. When that report is done, we'll come to the airport at the next airport board and we'll provide an update of what that report has said. And then we'll provide the updated category exclusion to everybody when that report is done so that we can be open and honest about what the issue that the airport had for that project. It is an unfortunate oversight that Wolpert made. The FAA did not catch it in their review. The airport did not catch it in our review of it either. So there are a lot of heads to shake about that, but we're working together to correct it and to be honest about the issue we had with that taxiway. I can answer questions about the process, about the CADEX that we had or the category exclusion, but it is a situation that we're working through as expeditiously and transparently as we can.
So this is what the bids are on. So no work started. So I guess now that we'll get this report in, if there's something that needs mitigating, it could impact the bid process or.
Yeah, I think Ben has maybe more information on how it impacts the bid timelines, but bids were open today. I believe there's a timeline where the bids are held and honored if there's a delay in assigning the project. We would expect there to be a pretty quick turnaround, but we do want to be cautious and concerned about what that actually looks like. So it's not being fast tracked, it's being an honest, on the ground look at what the conditions are and to make sure that we're being honest about what the water report looks like. So there may be a delay in the project. I don't know. I can't say for certain today, but I can tell you that we want to be as forthright as we can about the situation.
Questions, board? Okay, next item.
I take them from here.
Oh, I can stop talking?
Yeah. All right, so Basin 160, Eric mentioned it. So this is to take that, what is currently kind of a pond right now, and formalize it into a regional detention facility and install an outlet structure so that when we develop the south side of the field, the flows from that additional impervious surface are released through that pond at pre-build levels. So it was a recommendation of the master drainage report, and we have designed that project fully. It's out for bid currently, and bids are due on July 18th. So if anyone's interested in that project, please direct your questions to Jeffco Purchasing. Our goal is to have that project completed by the end of 2024, because it's actually very important to have that done at the same time as any other projects going on the south side of the field. So that's Basin 160. Unleaded fuel. So this was an important initiative for the airport, and we continue to make sure we're doing this in a way that's cost effective, but probably most importantly, gets fuel here at an affordable level that actually gets it used in aircraft. So right now, we're still waiting the issuance of a request for qualifications through the Jeffco County purchasing process. And what's taken a little longer on that is we're following all the FAA procedural guidelines, because we expect to receive FAA grant funding on this project. So we'll be hopefully releasing that shortly to hire a firm that will design and help install a tank in a bulk fuel facility dedicated to unleaded fuel. We already have a truck. The expectation is then we can take large loads of unleaded fuel and tanker trucks at reasonable prices and start delivering that to aircraft through a partnership with one of our two FBOs. That's currently the plan. Moving on to Part 150.
I have a question on unleaded. Ben, are we still kind of married to the 94 octane? Are we looking at the GAMI 100 unleaded?
We've received kind of briefings from both of the providers. I think my sense from the flight schools right now is they are most comfortable with Swift 94 UL, at least the majority of them. And they're going to be the biggest users that we can switch to unleaded quickly. However, I think we are very open-minded about whenever that tank is actually installed, we're going to take that moment in time and look at what's the right product to bring to this airport. We'll probably have more discussions with airport tenants in terms of everyone's comfort level with the different fuels. I think there'll be a Swift 100 octane product by then as well. Things are just rapidly changing in space right now.
What availability major factor?
Yes, that as well.
Get up here.
Yeah.
I think GAMI supposedly has 1 million plus gallons ready to ship.
That's what we've heard. Yeah. It depends who you talk to, which is the right product. It's hopefully there's a clear direction when we have our tank. So moving on to the Part 150, as you all know, you heard an update last time, but this is our process for actually studying aircraft noise impacts. And so it involves a noise modeling exercise and then the development of a noise compatibility plan that is reviewed and weighed in by the FAA. So we have selected a consultant for that. We went out for an RFQ and hired our S&H to do that process. We now also have an FAA approved scope of work. So they've signed off on the way we are going to go through that study. And so now we're working towards a full grant package, hopefully by the end of July, so that we can get underway this fall with that study and with a contract with the consultant. So that project will include check-ins with this board. That's actually in the scope of work that's approved. It'll also include public open houses and a dedicated project webpage and other outreach efforts. So more to come on that. That's all I have.
Any questions on any of the updates, board? All right, next on our agenda is to confirm the next meeting date. It would typically be August 14th. Do we have any known conflicts with that at this time? All right, seeing none, let Ben know if so, but we will move forward with August 14th as our next one. Before we go for a motion to adjourn, one of the things I do want to make sure that everyone's invited to and knows about is immediately following our meeting that's about to wrap up here. We invite everyone to stay, meet and greet with our new airport director, the team, and welcome our new neighbor into our community and someone that's looking forward to working with everyone on our great airport here. So please feel free. It will be very informal, so keep it light, keep it friendly, and we look forward to meeting and greeting as such. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Only 5 minutes past 2, so good job. All right, we are going to our meet and greet. Thank you all for joining us today.